If you're like most small business owners, not long after opening up, you soon find yourself in the trenches of working in the business. The nitty-gritty day-to-day details, the tasks, the to-dos, the checklists, the never-ending fires you have to put out. Now, much of this is very important work, and it's necessary, and it's not to be avoided. But if you don't regularly carve out time to work on the business instead of in the business, you may soon realize that growth has stagnated and you've hit a ceiling and you're wondering why things aren't growing. It's far too easy to lose sight of the high-level long-term vision for where you're going. But even if you're able to make time for this, where do you start, right? I'm going to outline a very simple framework that I've used throughout my entrepreneurial journey. What I love about this framework is it's simple and it can work with you at every stage of the business. In other words, it scales with you. Now note, this will change over time. I encourage you to revisit this on a regular basis, at least as part of your annual planning process, so that you can course correct as needed. Before we jump in, I have to give a shout out to Mark Benioff. He's the founder of Salesforce.com, and he shared a version of this on his blog a long time ago. Now I've tweaked this just a bit, but the foundation of it is from his V2 Mom framework, so if you want to look that up, I highly encourage it. So let's start at the beginning, with mission and purpose. Or as Simon Sinek would say, let's start with the why. Why does your company even exist? Some questions you might consider answering as you pull on this thread. What motivated you to get started in the first place? What do you want to achieve? What's the future you envision? How will you make the world a better place? Now, just a quick hint here, I hope your answers to these questions aren't to make a lot of money. There's nothing wrong with making a lot of money as an entrepreneur, but that should be the byproduct of a big vision, not the reason for your existence. Why? This will be your team's rallying cry. You can't use making a lot of money yourself to motivate your team, and you want to keep them aligned and in sync with your vision. It's really hard to get inspired by a founder or owner who just wants to make a bunch of money. If possible, make it short and memorable. You want your team to be able to commit this to memory. Let's move on to the core values. This is going to be the foundation of your culture and something you use as a lens to evaluate everything, from who you hire to who you work with. Here's a few questions you might consider when thinking about your core values. What's important to you? Whether or not your company succeeds, what are the things you're not willing to compromise on? What makes you unique and different from your competitors? What important character traits will you expect everyone on the team to exemplify? How do you expect your employees to treat each other? How do you expect them to treat your customers? Now, once you've finalized your list, write out a more detailed description of what this means to the company and create a list of examples in action of how this might play out. For example, if one of the core values you landed on is humility, this might include what's best for the team, not just for you. Put others before yourself. Admit your mistakes. Give credit. So these are just some ideas tied to one value of humility. You'll want to do this for each one of your core values. You want your team to deeply understand how to actually bring these things to life. Here's a few other tips to consider. If you've got a core group of leaders already in place, or even just a small team, include them in the process of figuring out these things. Go wide first, throw out all ideas, no bad ideas, then narrow in on what you really want to focus on as an organization, even letting your team vote on the things that are most important to them. Keep it to 3 to 5 things. Beyond that, people will never remember them and you'll never actually use them. If your values are a single word, add a one-liner to explain the heart behind it. For example, humility. Don't think less of yourself, think of yourself less. Okay, let's talk strategy. How are you going to actually accomplish that vision you have? Creating a strategy will likely be the most involved and difficult portion of this process, and it's going to require input from other key leaders on your team and maybe even your customers if you have them already. Some questions you'll try to answer here. What are the key activities of your company? How are you actually going to make money? What are the products or services you will offer? Who is your target? And how are you going to reach them? What are the channels or method you might use for acquiring those customers? How will you service your customers after you close them? What will your biggest drivers of cost be? Is it people? Is it space? Is it material? To help organize and guide this portion, you may want to leverage a tool like the Business Model Canvas. You can find tons of free templates online to help you get there. Okay, let's talk about risks. I can't promise you much, as each journey is unique, but I can promise you're going to encounter a lot of obstacles along the way. Doing your best to get in front of these key risks and challenges you might face can help you stay prepared at every turn and maintain your sanity. While there are always unknown unknowns, or things you can't possibly envision today, with a little planning, you can identify many of these. So some questions you might consider to uncover them. Go back to your strategy section and identify which of these is the biggest risk. Which of these questions are you most uncertain about? And which, if you're wrong about, has the highest likelihood of failure? In other words, what might kill your business? Are there existing competitors that will prevent you from being successful? Pro tip, there probably are. No business is so unique today that it has no actual competition. Don't fool yourself into thinking that. Okay, try this exercise. Fast forward 3 years. If your business was to fail, what would be the most likely cause of that? What other challenges or problems do you anticipate? Once you've identified your biggest risks, take some time to consider how you'll reduce the risk associated with each of them. What will have to be true for you to avoid these being a big issue? When will you have to address this? I even like to go so far as to stack rank a list from most risky or most threatening to my business to least risky. Oftentimes, getting feedback from others on this point in particular can be really helpful. It'll help us identify the blind spots. Interview people who are several steps ahead of you. They've got a business in a similar space, but maybe they're not directly competitive. You'd be surprised how much entrepreneurs like helping each other out. Ask them what the biggest landmines were that they hit or they stepped on when they were at your stage. You'll learn a lot by doing this. Okay, let's talk about your KPIs. How will you measure success? It's great to know where you're going, but if you don't have a way of identifying where you're at any given point in time, the destination isn't that helpful. While I'm a huge proponent of tracking as much as you can so you can identify patterns and trends, unexpected outcomes, things like that, I think it's even more important to understand the key performance indicators. How are you going to measure your business? We all know that which gets measured gets optimized. I recommend looking at 2 different sets of KPIs, and within each, you're going to narrow down to the 1 to 2 metrics that really matter. Even if you end up tracking a bunch of them, make sure you prioritize the ones that are most important. As you start to think about what KPIs to track, I recommend looking at 2 different sets of them. Within each set, we're going to narrow it down to our top 1 to 2 metrics that matter the most. Even if you end up tracking more than that, we need to know what's most important to our business. Okay, the first set are going to be leading indicators of success. These are going to be things that are going to help you identify what's coming next, so you're not surprised or blindsided by either growth or by valleys in your business. These might be things like how many leads are coming in, so the top of your funnel, overall demand for your services, number of applications you're getting when you have a job posting, employee satisfaction, your NPN score or your customer satisfaction score. Now the second set is going to be trailing indicators of success. In other words, what are the key measurable outcomes that tell us the health of our company? Things like revenue, profit, customer churn, maybe repeat business, employee retention. Things like this are going to give you a good idea of how your business is operating.